Will they give enough?
Yeah, well, you're a Westie now, I can tell that by that.
Yeah. I approve of the long hair.
So, we've just started. There's no intro.
Oh, kia ora.
So thank you, Barbara, for coming to our podcast.
Unfortunately, I'm so short that I'm trying to see you.
Man, I was thinking because of the COVID-19 and the lockdowns, I think you would be in Samoa right now covering the elections.
Oh, yes. I'm actually really embarrassed because I'm on annual leave for family reasons, and over the years I've sacrificed so much of myself to my job, and I really had to take this time off for my family for a big event that we were having, and I just couldn't not. Yeah. And so I didn't cover the Samoa elections, but I've been watching with interest. And of course, this is a big one to cover, this one. This is a big one. So I did some training with Samoa 1, TV1. And so I've been watching their coverage and very proud of my guys. I think I call them my guys, but they're not, obviously. They're amazing journalists in their own right. But I'm like the proud mother hen going, oh, you guys are rock. You're doing such a good job. It's time for great change worldwide. And now we're seeing the sort of change in the Pacific as well. So, pretty exciting. But no, I haven't covered it. So, embarrassing. But, some things sometimes you have to put your family first. So that's what I've done.
Yeah. Because, for the longest time, I've seen you on TV and stuff, on the news, covering the Pacific. That to me, that's like a dream job because you're going around Pacific Islands. Yeah. Like every year, you're going to probably all of them.
I have been to all the foreign countries, but having said that, a lot of people think they're like, oh, you must go all the time, But actually, I probably go away on average 6 times a year. But I've made sure that we've set up cameramen and stringers, what we call stringers in those countries, so that we can also contribute to the economy and to help out our brothers and sisters overseas who are trying to make a living. And we don't give enough for them to make a living, but it's a bit of pocket money and I think it's really important to get that on the ground perspective as well. So a lot of the time I just can't be there for cost reasons, COVID, we've seen that. But I don't go away as much as people think, but dream job, absolutely. It certainly is my dream job.
I say that carefully because I know it's a dream job, but that's because no one sees the hard work behind it. That's the outcome they see, but the hard work behind it, they might not.
It's really hard work. There's been times that I think it's the amount that you've got to pack into a day, because when you think about it, it's only 2 minutes on screen, right? And you think, oh, how hard can it be? But you've got to go out, you've got to get the interviews, you've got to get pictures for every single word that you say. You have to script it. And when we're overseas, I edit myself, so I edit it. And then we feed it back. And sometimes the feeding it back can take a long time. So there have been times that I felt like I'm going to have a heart attack, And in the old days, when we used the old system, like internet system, we call it FTP, and you'd watch it tick along real slow, and you're looking at your watch there, I'm going to have a heart attack, it's not going to get back in time. We have something called FTD, fail to deliver, and those are bad letters to have with your name. So and there's been a couple of times we've FTD'd because the equipment or whatever's just not quite made it, but most of the time you do it, and then you'd have to do a live, so it's a lot to pack in a day. But I do love it, and it requires a lot of planning to make sure that I like to tell stories. I don't just like to get, pictures, a grab from someone, and quickly write it and, done. For me, it's more, we owe our people more than that. For me, it's a responsibility to tell a story and to make it relatable to people. I don't want mums, dads, anyone who's watching, sitting on the couch at home not relating to it in some way or not feeling an emotion. That's a sign of a good story, is whether it's anger or compassion or love or happiness or inspiration, whatever they feel. When I want them to feel something when they watch my story. And I owe it to the people who trust me to tell their stories as well. So for me, it is actually the weight of responsibility sometimes. It can be pretty tough sometimes.
Is it, so every time we see you on TV doing a story, is that all you? Is that you?
Yeah.
Is that you finding out that story and
So
organising
I'd
everything?
say 90% of my stories I bring to the table. Like, people have contacted me on Facebook or email, or I've rung around to my contacts, or I've heard about something, and so I bring it to the table. Sometimes there's an event, what we call an event-driven story. So it might be the King of Tonga's coronation or the Samoa elections. Those are event-driven stories. So it's a given that I'd cover it. But it is me, and I find the talent, and I find everything, and try and write a beautiful story. Not beautiful is probably not the right word, but I like to make a story, a proper story, and then it's got to be factual, it's got to be fair, it's got to be all those things.
When we talked about, you're talking about the FTD, failed to deliver. I think if anything shows now of the islands, I think the Samoan election showed how technology really is at the forefront at the moment.
100%.
Because my dad, and we talked about it last week, he's a YouTube specialist now. And he's telling me what to look up on YouTube.
Right.
Yeah,
Don't you love that?
Yeah, and that's the cool thing, because I remember you've been relaying stories from Samoa, Fiji, and Tonga, and how you said it was a responsibility. I can understand that, because our parents, they didn't have the advantage of having YouTube and seeing these photos or videos from
Facebook Live. Stuff like
exactly.
That.
So when you came on, I knew, okay, she's going to be talking about either Samoa, all these islands, and sometimes that's the way that they can see. Have information back to them, or have a part of them put on TV.
That's exactly right. It's about for me, it's always about heart. I know that sounds a bit cliche, but it's actually true. So I know I look like a white girl, but for me, it's about making sure that our people's issues, and sometimes it's issues they don't want on TV. Like, believe me.
I know.
Yeah.
Like, I think there was one, I know, our loyal Samoans are. So when the rugby union spat with the World Cup with the money and that, it divided our work, because we had older Samoan men, and they were loyal to...
Sure.
Yeah.
That's right.
And we, the young guys, we're getting the news from you guys and John Campbell and that. And then, it did cause a divide.
For sure.
Because we thought, well, we're getting the news, and they're like, no, that's wrong.
Yeah, and quite often I'll get, oh, it's so negative. Well, I'm a reporter as well as the Pacific Correspondent. So as a reporter, I've got to tell what's newsworthy, right? But what I would say is that if we don't tell issues, you guys understand this, because I find the younger generation a bit more understanding, I guess, that if you don't tell issues, if you don't confront it and put it there and bring it out in the open, nothing changes, nothing. And so for me, it's always being about putting those issues up, even if it hurts. Like, it might hurt your community, your church, your family, yourself. Like, there's been times that I've copped a lot of flack, but I'm a big girl, I can cope with it. But what I mean is that it's really important to confront those issues and to put them up there, because if we don't, nothing changes. Like, we live in a pretty dire sort of society some of the time, not all the time. We also live in a beautiful society, but there are times that there's racism, there's people, issues with scam artists. Like, I've been working on this pyramid scheme that's been affecting a lot of our communities here in
Is that there with the Tongan community?
it is the Tongan, but then it spread. Like, so it's also in the Samoan community, it's in the Tuvalu community. And after we did that story, I've got like lots of people saying, "Oh, this, it's here." And there's so many. And that enrages me because we don't have a lot of money, and the people who are putting in, a lot of mums got caught up in this, hardworking mums who, they're saving money for their kids' school fees, etc. And they were told, you put this in, you'll get fast money return, and they talked a big game and they got lured in, and it was easy. I've heard the luring in, and it's very convincing.
I saw the video that you provided.
And it went on for like an hour.
Yeah.
Like, it's so disgusting. No, it just makes me angry. Because it makes me furious. It makes me absolutely wild that when people rip off other people, there's just no excuse for it. And I don't care what the nationality is. It's just wrong. So I do a bit of that. So sometimes, the issues that I have to cover aren't that pleasant. But you know how I always do it is that if, say it's a big health issue, I always look at, okay, so how is our community dealing with it? And you can turn it into the strength. So what might be a negative issue is the strength of a community. This is what we're going to do. This is how and you can show really good Pasifika on telly doing good things, even though the issue may be negative. Then that's got to be good. It's all about normalizing, putting our people in mainstream. And not in a courtroom, like not in a police car, like not just that, like and so that's how I try and deal with it. And so a lot of my contacts are people, amazing humans in the health department, PHOs and, all over the place, schools, these young people, the bubblegum, I think they're called the bubblegum group, they're amazing. And I'm always in awe when I meet people like that. So the issue may be negative, but, it's what you do with it that can make a difference, eh?
It's that Pacific Island collective that's our strength that you're talking about. Like,
yeah.
I mean, that is our strength. And,
it is our strength.
Yeah. And if we can find a way to channel that to do good things.
Yeah, but at the same time, I won't back away from big issues. So it's that balance, eh? But yes, you're right. We're a collective. That's how we work best as families, as community. It's also our downfall sometimes, but it is our strength. And if we can work that, then we're good people, and it's good for New Zealand to see that.
I think how you said, like the Pacific Island like collective and that. If you hadn't exposed that pyramid scheme, I would not have known about it.
No.
The thing is, because we were talking about there can be a negative as well, because a pride might have been what stopped these guys from coming up, because I don't think any other mainstream would have said, they wouldn't have had that, like, their hand on the pulse, or would not have known about this thing until you had brought it up.
Yeah, because I got approached by these women on Facebook, on my professional page, and they're like, Barbara, we saw what you did with the passports. That Samoan guy who took the passports off the overstayers and charged them money. And can you help us with this? And it was a very brave lady, actually. I obviously can't name her because she wanted to stay unidentified. She kept saying, we've got to do it because my friends, family, they're all being dragged into this thing and it's got to stop. And so just by putting it on, it made people aware of it. And then even I make a policy of not to read Facebook comments generally, just because there's a lot of nasty people out there. And a lot of them, I'm not talking about Pacific Islanders, but if anything you put on the One News Facebook page can... Yeah, so it's just, I always tell the young reporters, don't read the comments. Just be strong in yourself and what you're doing. However, for that I did, because I thought there might be new information coming forward, and there was. So, Yeah, and a lot of people are like, see, hey, and tagging someone else, see, I told you this was a scam, blah, blah, blah. So it was good. That was really good. It's in the public interest. So that's how I kind of do measures. And one of the things is it in the public interest? Yes. Yeah, that certainly was. It's not just about impact. And for me, I don't care if my face is on the TV or not. I really don't. I couldn't care less. Quite often, a lot of my stories won't have my face in it, right? It's only if I can add something or show something, then I will, or if I'm doing a live cross. But really, I just don't care about that stuff. I'm too old for that stuff. I just want to tell the story.
Do you agree that, we're talking about the Pacific Island village mentality and how we can channel that to give positive things in the community? Do you think, if to me it feels like that when positive things happen, it's only in different events,
it's so
and
true.
then it dies away, then another event comes.
And I'm guilty of that too. Seriously, that's absolutely right. There are lots of positive things happening, and they just don't get aired. And the bottom line is, we need more Pacific people in mainstream to tell their stories, because there's only one of me at One News, right? And I can't fit I have a list now of a story. I've been on leave for 2 weeks. I have a list of stories, about 20 stories that I'm far behind on. A lot of people have come to me with, Barbara, can you? And it's like, I probably don't have time. And then I do a Pacific update as well. I do my, which only goes online. It's a Pacific news bulletin I do once a week. And I put that together. I write it, I edit it, I do everything for it. So I'm really busy. So yeah, you're right. There's not enough. And it's not just on me, it's on everyone. And you're right, it's sort of like the easy hits, like music. But there's so many cool stories. I was at New Zealander of the Year the other day, and there's this guy from Christchurch. He's a barber, he cuts hair, counsels, and it's all about violence, domestic violence. He's amazing. I went up to him afterwards. I said, I want to do a story on you. I'm going to come down to Christchurch and do your story. You're amazing. And he was a finalist, And it's stuff like that you don't really hear enough about. 100%. And print should be doing more. All the media should be doing more. But they don't, because I don't think it's a lack of contacts. It's a lack of caring, maybe. They just don't care enough to do it.
That's probably why I think podcasts are important, because, those little stories that get left out can be covered if people bother to do something about it.
To do it. And you've got to want to do it too. It's a lot of my stories that I push for. It's not easy to get a story on the news. I have to fight for pretty much everything you see. So
how much of a bottleneck do you have then? Since it's just one of you.
Yeah, a huge bottleneck. But I'm a nasty piece of work, and everyone at work knows it. So when I say there's a story that I want to cover and I need to cover, then they're pretty good with me. I very seldom be told no. Because if I come to the table saying there's a good story, then there's a good story. And some of my favourite stories have been not about the big issues. They're just little. They involve one person and doing amazing things. I think my favourite story of all time was that Tai Kami. I don't know if you remember her. She's a little Tongan girl, and she had cancer. And I'd followed her, done a number of stories on her. She'd been here in New Zealand for treatment, and they'd had to raise funds for her because she didn't, wasn't a New Zealand, citizen, all that sort of stuff. And she did, she wrote this amazing blog, and she was a composer, and she inspired so many Tongan people. She must have been about 14, 15. Oh my gosh. And I was in Tonga for the coronation of the king, and she was dying. And we heard her auntie, who's a friend of mine, actually rang me and said, Barbara, come to the house. There's going to be something big happening today. So we were the only media there, and Tangata Pasifika were there too. But we work sort of very closely together. And they were there, I know I was there, and the cameraman was there, and we're sitting on the floor, and the next minute, and she's lying in her bed, and next minute the king walks in, and it was very rare for a king to walk in to a commoner household, and he gave her a medal, and she played the song to him that she'd played, Walk On, Walk Strong, and it's a beautiful song, and he started to cry. And this was a king who had been made quite a lot of fun. People had made fun of him, and, you know, he was very sort of British and quite, you know. And I was sitting on the floor very close to them, and I was thinking at the time, there are lots of things going through my head, and one is I'm watching history being made. Seriously. Like this king is here in this house, and afterwards, you know, I interviewed Tai, and she actually I just cried. She was the strong one. I was the one who like blubbered like a baby. And I went outside and interviewed her dad, Taholo Kami, and he said to me, you know, she said to me, Dad, you know, I'm ready to go. And I said to her, well, who am I to make you stay? And I tell you what, that story, man, it just, for some reason, it's really touched my heart. And about 3 weeks later, my cameraman, the same cameraman I was with, Tom, because we swap around, you don't always have the same cameraman, we were in Niue for the Pacific Forum, and we were sitting having some quick lunch at the cafe, and they had the radio on, and they started to play Thai's song, and they announced her death, and we just sat there, and I actually cried, and it still has the ability. I'm friends with her parents now, and they live in Fiji, and they run a cancer cancer association for parents whose children are sick, and it's very hard for Pacific families because there's not the facilities that there are here. And they offer support, moral support, and they run their children around the hospital if they and help the parents. And they're just amazing people. So yes, it's times like that and that wasn't a massive, you know, like that. It's not a cyclone. But it's a story that's probably touched me. It's a story I will remember forever, you know.
Oh, that's amazing. I can't really, you know, I remember the story, but I just didn't, I didn't know the background to the,
it's many years ago now too. It must have been, I can't remember, like maybe it was 2009, or it could have even, and then of course that king died. I mean, I've been up there for 2 kings' funerals, and like, that and every time I go up there, it's, oh man, you know, the Tongans, they do this ceremony, like it's incredible, and to be a part of that. And there's been times I've watched I think they call it the cataflank, and it's that big, it's like this big, it takes like 200 men to lift it, and the coffin's on top, and they walk up from the palace up to the burial grounds. They walk up this road, and you can see them coming from. And the first time I saw it, oh man, I tell you, and you know, they can't falter because they will die if that falls on. You know, they will be crushed. And on top of the, you know, and they've got the guy who's leading the way, and there's so many, you know, they've got. It's seeped in tradition, and I always think it was at that moment when I watched it, and I was like, man, I'm privileged. This is not my culture, and here I am. And that is the weight of responsibility to make sure. I think I wrote one of my best scripts ever was with that because I really felt the weight of responsibility, and it was beautiful, and the respect, and to be able to bring that to mainstream New Zealand and show how beautiful it is, and oh man, it just meant something good, eh? It was really good.
Can we still see these stories online?
Yeah, I think so. I must check, actually. I must check because, online is weird. Like, sometimes our systems are a bit weird, but I think so. There's a lot there. I think the latest, the ones that I am still heartbroken over, are the Samoan measles stories. And I still feel a bit guilty, and I came out with a, you have to, as a reporter, you just go and cover it. You've got to stay focused. We're not, it's not about us, it's about these poor people. They're losing children, So there's no room for a lot of emotion. If you're going to do your job properly, you just got to swallow it, get it together. But it was hard. There were a lot of dying children, and we saw a lot of death. And when I came back after doing 2 trips up there, and I was quite devastated by what we saw. And then we heard that we'd been to see this mum, and she'd had a baby who had measles, and she immediately took the child to the hospital, and the child survived. And her story was, please take your children to the hospital. Now, she had another sick child. When we were interviewing her, there's another sick child there, and we're like, is your child all right? Oh, yes, it's all right. We're just giving natural medicine. He'll be all right, or if they get sick, we'll take them. Anyway, as we're walking out of this little compound, there was 3 other houses, and these mothers came running up to us. Please, you've got to help us. You've got to help us. And it's that role when you're a reporter, but you've got to help. And so we went and had a look, and there were 3 extremely sick, dying children, and they could barely breathe, and we knew it was bad. And so what we did is we quickly, but not immediately, so we're interviewing the mothers, did real quick interviews. I said, let's just quickly get this and film them. And as we were looking at it, I said, I think we've got to wind this up. They look like really sick. Now, these guys had no phones, because there's no phone service up there, right? It was up in the middle of nowhere. They had they're not allowed on the roads, and they had no vehicles anyway. And because it was the 2-day lockdown, so no one's allowed out on the roads, no buses. So they couldn't get their children. So we jumped. I knew that there'd be a Ministry of Health team. They were coming around to give vaccinations. So we jumped in our car, and I said, we've just got to go. And so we raced down, and we're about 10 minutes out of the road, going down the road, going like the clappers, thinking these kids are sicker than we thought. And we see the Ministry of Health coming up, this team with a bus. And so I jumped out of the car, and I ran down the road and stopped them. And I said, you've got to come. And took them up to this house, and they looked at these kids, and they were like, yeah. And so this guy, he jumped in his van, and he was the team leader, and he went 20 minutes to get to make a call to ring for the ambulance to come. And so we filmed it all on the road, but of course we never said that we went and helped, because that, come on, it's a bit of, that's not about us. There's some reporters who would have, but, that's not how I do it. And so it was, and so they took these kids away, and we found out that, and feeling quite pleased because the kids survived. We heard, my friend rang me, another reporter friend who I work with, because you've got to work with the locals on the ground, because they know they're better than we are. And she said, Barb, they've survived, oh, thank goodness, gosh, we did something special that day. No, because we forgot about the child next door, the sick child next door. I forgot. I completely forgot, because we're so tied up with these extremely sick children. We heard that child died, and I felt so guilty. And so bad, yeah. My cameraman told me that he'd mentioned it that there's another child next door, but they were so intent on helping these 2 very sick children. Yeah, so, I mean, you got to deal with stuff like that. So I came back and I was a bit of a mess, and whatever I am, I always think, wow, imagine those parents, so many children, over 80 children dead in this one country, and what a disaster. What a disaster. And I guess with that burden or with that knowledge and what I saw during COVID, I was really scared for our people, like really scared, because I saw how quickly the measles spread, and it could have been so bad for us. It could have been so bad.
Because of the measles, do you think that in Samoa, like the reaction to the COVID sort of
over the top, completely, 100%, 100%.
Yeah.
It'll be a long time before they open their borders, would be my guess. Although, I mean, depends what happens with the government, doesn't it? Because we don't know yet. But people are very conservative now. One of the biggest things that happened that shouldn't have happened is that they used to have these women's groups, and the nurses would go to the women's groups up in the villages, different villages, and they'd check the children, check their teeth and their hair and everything, and give them their vaccinations. And it was, but that was all taken away from the villages and taken to the main hospital. Now, a lot of people didn't have the money to get from their village to the main hospital. And so a lot of the kids weren't getting vaccinated. It wasn't that easy. And sometimes I think our traditional ways, the way we do things is there's a reason for it. And I think that, it would have been better if it hadn't been taken out of the women's groups and the nurses.
Was this ever brought up? Because...
Yeah, it was. I did a story on it, actually. I was pretty wild about it. Well, actually, it wasn't me being wild about it. It was mentioned. Someone mentioned it to me, and I was like, are you serious? Like, a lot of people, it's so divorced from your people, because these people, they live so far up, and people saying, oh, they should have called for and why didn't they call for an ambulance? Well, they didn't have cell phone service.
Yeah.
They've got a phone. There's no cell phone service. They're not allowed to, even if they had a car, they're not allowed to be in a car. But they would have broken the law to go, sure. But there's no buses. It's not easy. And I just think sometimes, we forget how people live and how people are, and compassion, and just going back to the traditional ways in some areas, not in all areas, but in some areas would be good, because those women knew what they're doing.
With just going back to the elections,
you've
seen Samoa, over the time that you've been covering Pacific Islanders. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, did you think that this would be this would happen at all?
No, I didn't. And even this time, I've been caught a little bit. But I mean, I knew that there would be more seats given to opposition, because they're sort of feeling a change in Samoa, and there's been some pretty weighty issues and I think when you change big laws, especially laws to do with land, I won't say it's problematic. There's always going to be big issues. Land is our soul. Without the land, where our ancestors are buried, and we are not who we are. Like that, we need that land. It's part of us. And so when that started to be meddled with, it wasn't surprising to me that there was a change. But what was surprising to me was that it was so big. But then, I always say to myself, if I ever think something's going to be, I never try and predict things too much, because whatever I think, it's the Pacific and it'll be the opposite. So you're a mug. If you think that you can I'm sure it's going to be. Well, you're probably not. Fiji's the worst for doing that. I used to do that. Well, you'd say, no, I think it's blah, 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 blah. And it would be the complete opposite. So as a young reporter, you learn pretty quickly to not. You can make an analysis, sure, but just be aware.
I was looking at the results, and it's quite funny because there's quite a contrast because Upolu, you look at it, was all, I think, all blue.
Yeah.
And then you went to Savai'i. Yeah, and it was, I think they won pretty much every seat bar two.
That's right. Savai'i did really, really well. I've been calling them the opposition, but I suppose we don't know if they're the opposition yet,
not
right?
Just yet.
That was really interesting too, because when the results started coming through, I was like, Savai'i,
Yeah.
come on. Maybe because I don't know. Maybe because they're sort of on the outer a little bit. Maybe it's got to do with the villages and what's happened there.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out. I kind of thought maybe the government have promised these guys so much, but they've always concentrated on Upolu. And I think they might have just got fed up and thought, you know what? No, we need a change because I think if there's any with the meddling with the land in that, it's gonna it would really affect a lot of people in Savai'i.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those ministers though lost their seats. Like, it's a real. I think it. I'm not Samoan, so I'm sort of. But what I would say is that that's what elections are for. The people speak. That is the time. If you ever think your vote is not important, we're seeing an exact example and of why it is important, right? So I've been watching with so much interest going, and they're still doing there's still the counting is still, it's still going on, and then there's going to be the kingmaker. Who knew he'd be so important? Certainly not him. So it's going to be edge of your seat stuff. And, it doesn't matter who gets in. They're going to have to deliver.
Yeah.
They are, because, once you get over, say the opposition gets in, the hero status has got to go. Like, you've got to, the honeymoon will be over pretty fast, and then you better deliver. The same with, I guess, if Tuila Epa comes back, and, what I would say is that, he's been there a long time. And my firm opinion, and this is I'm not judging Tuila Epa at all, but what I would say is no politician in the world should be in politics for too long, because they just get too comfortable. And I think that, and it doesn't matter what side you're on, politicians, they're not my favourite people.
I saw the headline, he said he was the second, so he was the first. Do you know who the first was? I saw the headline said he's the second longest serving Prime Minister in the world.
Yeah, I don't know who the first is. In fact, I thought he was the first.
Yeah.
Like, he's gone to more Pacific forums than I have, and that's saying something. He's been there for so long. But no, I'm actually, maybe it's one of those, coup leaders. That's my guess. Because generally speaking, someone who's voted in, but there's the system in Samoa leaves a bit to be desired in terms of who can stand for politics, and I'd like to see that change. I'd like to see not just Matthijs being able to stand, because we're coming to a time now that people need to be represented. We need to, our people need to be represented, and that's not just in some areas or some sectors, So I'd like to see that change.
When it comes to the amount of seats in Samoa, Samoa is such a small country, but you've got 51 seats. Do you think that's a bit?
It's pretty.
That's quite a few for only two islands, pretty much.
But when the population's relatively, in most Pacific countries, there's a huge number of politicians. Don't ask me why.
Yeah.
There just is. And the Cook Islands has got a huge number, and they've only got like 17,000 people. And their parliament only meets 10 times a year because they're always worried about being overthrown. So, I mean, so Samoa's doing all right. Yeah. But yeah, look, it's just the way it's been divvied out. And, I'm not a politician, and I'm not a Samoan, but maybe that's something that they'll never look at it.
Yeah.
No, because that means they'll do themselves out of a job.
I was going to say that. I mean, what a great time to be a politician.
Brave politician to cut back the number of seats.
Exactly.
I'm going to I'm going to sack myself.
I was just thinking how interesting the whole thing is with the elections in Samoa, because for the first time, there's been drama in the election, and it's funny because we've just had
real drama.
We've just had the Trump drama over there in the States and all that, and next minute now someone's having their little fun.
Is it a sign of the times? I think people have got braver, and with COVID, and more concerned about what's going on around them. And so I think maybe that is part of it as well.
I think you're right, because you're right, because COVID has actually put society into a corner, really.
Yeah.
Like everyone's on lockdown, everyone's thinking more about their family and around them more.
That's right.
So and then when you do that and you got locked down to make you think about things, you got to think about all this stuff.
100%.
Wouldn't it? But plus, if you came out, say you are backed into a corner because of COVID, you would have lost your jobs, things like that. Anyone that's going to offer you a pretty, because they came out pretty quick and fast with their promises as well. And, I was watching a live stream, and they'd connected free Wi-Fi to one of the schools, and I think it was Eva or something.
Right.
Yeah, me and my dad were watching, and he was like, I'm going fast. Okay. Based on free Wi-Fi I get in, but, because that's where he's from. He's from Savati too, and he was quite vocal with, he was stuck with his old school view because he's a Guila Epa guy, but because Savati is where his heart is, he wants what's best for his.
Sure.
So it's, if we're talking about it this way, I really feel for our parents that didn't have a chance to go back and cast
be
a vote.
Part of it.
Yeah, exactly. Because my dad would have loved to be there, be a part of history.
Yeah.
So that's the downside of it.
It is the downside to COVID. And also there's other downsides in that I think governments around the Pacific, and Samoa's no exception, have put in some pretty weighty rules, and they're getting away with it. They're calling it under sort of COVID. Oh, it's our COVID restrictions, And there's no need. Like, so for example, I believe Fiji's still got a curfew. Tonga's got quite strong rules, and it's actually for people, it's slamming down on their rights. And Pacific leaders, I find, they're quite conservative, and covering all these forums and stuff. When we had Bainimarama, the big coup leader, if you ask me, there wasn't a Pacific leader amongst them who didn't secretly wish they had the same kind of dictatorship.
Had an army behind them like that.
And that is my personal opinion, is that I could tell that they were all like a little bit envious. And that's, as a woman reporter too, they're used to me now, but it's a pretty tough gig sometimes. And they, when I was, what I have found is that there's a lot of laws being passed that shouldn't be, that isolation is actually being worked to not in a good way, and the accountability on the world stage and with the Pacific stage and on the regional stage isn't really there at the moment. And so the sooner that all that comes back to normal, the better. But of course, safety is first.
How you were talking about these restrictions and that. What's your view on the one about us not opening up a bubble with the Cook Islands?
I agree with it. I agree that we shouldn't open the bubble with the Cook Islands until I was up there a few, because I have a Cook Island stamp in my passport, so I can travel to and from without quarantine. Yay me. Now, I'm widely hated in my newsroom right when I came back. Nobody would talk to me because I came back a little bit tanned. So, but what, you know, when I went up there, the vast majority of the people didn't want the borders open until it was safe to do so. Now, having said that, I've got a huge amount of sympathy for their number one earner is tourism, more than any other Pacific country. Oh, but close to Fiji, but Cook Islands is huge up there. I think it's like 85% of their GDP, up to that much. So a lot of people in dire straits, but they're getting a subsidy and they're being helped as well. So it's important it open, but they weren't ready. And they can shout and scream from the rooftops, but our team of health experts were up there and they could see it wasn't ready. I could see it wasn't ready. And sure, there's no COVID here. Like you think, okay, we're great, let's open the borders. So you have to plan for the worst case scenario. So say someone goes up there in the plane, infected. So what are the steps that will happen? And when you've got those steps worked out, and it's, because there will be a case that I'm sure that would get up there, right? So, but as long as there's processes in place, it can be dealt with, right? So as soon as it's ready to be open, and I don't believe that it will be May, is my personal opinion after seeing what I saw. I hope it's soon, but I don't think it's going to be May. But it needs to be done safely, because we've got elders up there. There's, you know, the health system is not great. And it needs to be done properly.
See, I wouldn't have known that, because the way, you know,
I know, because
the news keeps
correct, but
news,
not
and
mine.
Mike Hosky,
Yes.
Mike Hosky keeps telling everyone that Cook Islands. Okay.
Yeah, we won't, because I tell you what, there's a very vocal tourist operator group up there, and they're amazing, and they do great work, and they are incredible what they do. They've done everything right, these guys. They've really, and gals, they've worked so hard to try and make it happen. But they have been let down last year, not now, because the health department's moving real quickly as it can to do all the stuff they're meant to do. There's a list. New Zealand's given them a list and said, you need to have these done and then we'll open the border, right? They didn't do it last year. And I do feel sorry for the tourist operators, because they've come up with suggestions. They've done everything they possibly can, knowing that their livelihoods are all their workers, you know, and they need to open soon. They do. So I have every sympathy, but they're very vocal, and they always have been. If there's a dinghy outbreak and I report on the dinghy, they don't like it, you know, you're going to affect our tourism. So they're very, very vocal, but it's one perspective, and you have to look at the wider picture. And the wider picture is they're not ready, but hopefully soon. Yeah.
So is the answer giving them more money to
yeah,
fit out
I mean,
their hospitals?
I think
pump money into the hospitals.
It's not so much. So they leaked a whole lot of doctors and nurses last year. They've just left. So they need, for a number of reasons, and it could have been prevented. So they're having to rebuild. So they're bringing in some people from Fiji. There's all that stuff. So there's stuff that we can't actually help with. But there is some stuff that we can, and sending a team up there perhaps to help with their COVID tracing, the lab, getting stuff sorted would go down a treat. Like, it would just be so helpful, and it would make it go faster. But my feeling is that probably they're just worried about resourcing here in New Zealand. But yeah, we've got to. I really genuinely feel that it would be good to send a team up there just to give them a hand, because they're in dire straits, and it needs to open, but safely. And so I'm more conservative than some of my colleagues who actually don't know what they're talking about. They don't. They haven't been up there. They have no idea. And for a lot of people, it's about being anti-government, New Zealand government. And it's, if they can take a swing at the New Zealand government, let's go and do that. But it's not about that. It's about
lives.
It's about, yes, you said it better than me. That's exactly right.
So why does the Aotearoa come out and just say it? Like, just say the reason why Just because of
She
this?
so
I think
she
she might have.
started just recently in the last when the Cook Islands Prime Minister came here about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and he announced some things that possibly they weren't ready to announce that, because I think that the May date was only something they were going to work towards, and he's announced like it's going to happen. And so since then, I think she's announced a couple of things. And he also announced that the vaccines were going to happen in May, and that's actually not true at all. That's absolutely not true. We don't know when the vaccines are going to happen in the Cook Islands. They will get our Pfizer vaccines. They are going to get it. But we don't know when we're getting our vaccines. So we don't know when they're going to either. It actually wasn't true.
I heard it out there and say we're last on the list because we're a low case, COVID case country.
Yeah, I still think we need to roll it out a bit quicker. I do.
I think, it kind of felt like when the Cook Island Prime Minister came, all the headlines were like he was trying to force Jacinda's hand.
He was.
But the thing is, now that we know that he's trying to force the hand because he's being pushed by the tourist group.
Yeah.
He's risking the lives of all the... I didn't look at it like that.
He's changed his rhetoric a little bit since then to safety. But yeah, that was exactly what happened. Pretty sad.
What about Fiji? Because I know you have your history in Fiji.
Up and down relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
And on again, off again.
That's where you got. That's right.
Yeah, I've had a lot because, just to put this into context, my mum was one of 12 children, right? And they all married in Kiribati, so that's where I grew up. And so they married different. Some married Kiribati, some married Solomon Islanders, one married Fijian. So I have Fijian cousins. I have Solomon Island cousins. I've got cousins everywhere around the Pacific, which I'm very proud of. And so I've been going to Fiji since I was a little girl. Because to get to New Zealand, you had to come through Fiji. So, because I lived there, and so we used to come, backwards and forwards. And I do love Fiji. It is a complicated, it's like an onion. It's more complicated than Polynesia, right? Melanesia is much more complicated. You take off a onion layer and there's another one, just like the top one. And then you keep going, and there's all these layers. It's very, very complicated. So I love Fiji, but I've been there for the coup. I was there in a hostage camp when George Speight took the parliamentarians hostage, and I was inside that. I got myself inside that camp, and I was inside the camp for about 3 nights, and it was pretty dangerous. And in the end, we had to make our escape because I started to feel, I was there to report, but after a time, 2 nights, I think, it was very dangerous. And these guys tried to break in. We were in the dining room. That's where we were sleeping, the reporters. I was with the local reporters, and I was working for radio then. And these guys from the village who they weren't the guys in balaclavas and the machine guns because they're more in control. These were guys who'd come out and they were on kava, and then they knew that we were in there, and they decided to try and break in and do what they were going to do to us. So lucky the kitchen staff who were in there with us had brought in their husbands to help protect. So they put up these big, these big forms that you sit on up against the door to stop them from coming in. It got to a point that we were told that the George Speight and co were going to use the media, and they were going to execute and hostage, and we would be the witnesses. And, it's time to go. So we made this plan, and we put over, because they were watching us through the security cameras, and we put these big jackets over the security cameras so that they, in case, and then we had this quick talk, and we just said, look, we've got to get out. How we do it, we'll just walk out to it. They're not going to let us out if they think we're not coming back. So we'll just go out 2 or 3 at a time and just stagger it. And when I walked out, I went with a couple of mates, and I was, real casual. It's the best act of my life. And I said to the guy, we'll see, we're coming back. We're just going down to get some clothes. We'll see you soon, And, I remember this gun pointed at my head, and I was just keep walking, smile, keep walking. So there was that time. But then there was the coup. And in a coup, you have a dictator, right? And the dictator has a handbook. They all have it. They all have the handbook on how to be a good dictator. And one of the things they're going to do is stop the media. So they censored my local friends who are all in the media there. And then I pretty much had an idea that the people who, not normal journalists who just go up for once and then don't come back, but people like myself who go up all the time, that we were going to be on the hit list. So Michael Field, myself, he worked for AFP, myself, and Sean Dorney, who's the ABC correspondent in Australia. And we were all good mates because we are the ones who are always covering the issues, like the foreign journalists going in and covering the issues. So the first person to get deported was Mike. And he was put into a sort of a hotel room, and then he was deported. Anyway, and then Sean Dorney got deported as well. And again, same sort of scenario. So two of them had gone. So I was like, yeah, it's just a matter of time, I think. And so also I was very, I wouldn't say the word brave, but it kind of was, because we'd be in the military camp and Baini Marama would refuse to take questions. He was a military commander back then, right? Refused to take questions, and he'd be in his, and I would always yell out, ask a question, because you can't let them get away with that, even though we were in a military camp. And I always remember one of the local journalists saying to me, I'm so scared when you ask the question, because it was scary times. Like, it was real scary. They were all armed soldiers. There's no rules. They were beating up journalists. They were, one journalist recently died as a result. He'd been hurt, like beaten in the camp. So they were taking people into the camp and smashing them and intimidating them, and also like any of the youth who were standing up against them, they were taken up, and you never heard from them again. They were let out, but they were, how do you put it, psychologically hurt, and they never spoke up again. Very few of them did. So we were working in those circumstances, and I was there with a cameraman and an SNG operator. There was a big satellite operator thing that we took up in those days. We don't anymore. We don't need it. But so there were two guys, two cameramen, and myself. And I went through, and I knew as soon as she put my passport in, it goes, Barbara, you've been denied entry. And so I immediately rang my boss, and I said, I've been, I had him on the call the whole time. I said, well, what's going to happen? And she said, I'm going to send you to a detention centre. And I said, I'm going to be sent to a detention centre. And he goes, put her on the phone. And so I gave the phone. That's going to make no difference. She's just doing her job, And he was like, you've got to let, what's happening. And anyway, what happened was they took me in a car and to this place, and it wasn't a hotel, it was a detention centre. The grate, open the door, the gates open, big metal gates, and we went in, and then I was taken upstairs to these rooms, and it was horrible because the doors couldn't lock, and there's just this window in the door, but I could come out and go to the there was a bathroom there, and for some reason they hadn't taken my phone off me, so I had my phone. So I rang every single person I knew. I was pretty worried, and I got a call from someone saying, we've heard that we've been debating whether to tell you, but we've been told by a military guy that they're going to come and get you tonight, so take you to the barracks. So I got myself ready. Physically, mentally, I put on my some trousers, and I put my inhaler, because I'm an asthmatic, in my pants, because I know what they do. And I waited, and every time I heard the door, the gate, I'd run to my window and climb up to look through the bars, and I'd see if it was a military car. And to make it worse, there was this girl in one of the other rooms, and I'd heard her talking. I assumed she was on the phone, a Korean girl, I think. And then she'd been taken off. I had not known, but she'd been taken off the plane because there was Korean Airlines came in all the time. That she was having some psychotic episodes, and so during the night when I'm lying there terrified, I heard this. She was outside my door, talking like that. Yeah. And so I had my plug. I've done a hostile environment course, and I know how to defend myself pretty well. And I had my plug, with the prongs. And I thought, if she comes in here, I'm going to attack her. Yeah. I'll make sure that nothing happens to me. So it's a horrible night. And I hadn't known, but I had rung Foreign Affairs as well. I'd rung everyone, and they had tried to get a team in to see me, and had been denied access. And that goes against the Geneva Convention. So the next morning I was still there, and I thought, this is a good sign. And they were, the people keeping me there were really nice. Fijians are lovely people, and they're very polite, and, they weren't horrible at all. And then they actually put me in the car and to take me, they said to the airport, but I was still scared. I'd been told. And so I'm thinking, please God, let it be the airport. Please God, let it be the airport. And then they drove me, and we drove into the airport, and and my camera crew were waiting there, Fiji TV were waiting there, and Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade representative was waiting there. And he let rip at the guy saying, "You've breached the Geneva Convention. How dare you? We take this very seriously." And he asked me if I was okay, and I needed water. I was really thirsty, and but I was all right. And he asked me what had happened. I told him, and then this guy from Fiji Airlines came out. He was like the head guy, and he goes, "Mr. Dreaver, we're going to upgrade you." And it was so sweet, and it actually nearly broke me because I was so tired. I hadn't slept all night, and taken onto the plane like a criminal, in front of everyone. But fortunately, I was taken to the front of the plane, and I was like this. It was like that movie, is it called Argos or something like that, where they go and rescue the hostages, and they're sitting on the plane, hoping that it takes off soon. And
That's the Ben
Affleck, that one. And I kind of felt a bit like that. Even it was ridiculous. Like, it was fine. I was fine. Nothing happened to me. I'm fine. But it was all psychological.
But you'd been given
I'd been given the heads up. But I'm glad it did show that. And then I realised what it's like for people in prison, because you have that taken away from you, that right. And it was the first time, and I really freaked out. For about 10 minutes when I was in there, I thought, I can't go anywhere. I can't go to the shop. I can't. And I really and then I was like, Barbara, get yourself together. This is ridiculous. Pull yourself together. You're a strong girl. Just, come on. But it did make me have an understanding, even though it was only for a night, what the mental sort of trauma of being having your liberty taken away from you. And I'm glad I had that. I think that happened for a reason.
When you just said that, when at the moment, was it like you're outside your body looking at yourself?
Yeah.
And thinking to yourself,
yeah, it was.
Oh, that's how it feels.
Yeah.
And then coming back, and then it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because I can really relate to that.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful thing to do, because I think that's because a lot of people, they can fold in those kind of situations.
Yeah.
And break down and stuff.
I've been in lots of situations where, and I know I'm not the person to fold, but you don't know until you're confronted with something. You actually don't know. I had no idea that I would be that person that could deal with any, I've had to deal with attacks. I've had to deal with, there was that time in Tahiti we were, it's going to sound we were in Bora Bora, and we don't often get to go to nice. Usually I'm doing like running around but we're actually doing sort of tourism stories, which never happens, never. It's like the one time in my entire career. And we heard this screaming. I heard this screaming, and I looked up and I saw this lady, Japanese lady, and she was running. And when you panic, you go to tunnel vision. So you don't see anything on the side. You are focused straight ahead. And she was going to the guys who were giving out the towels at the hotel. And I knew immediately that someone was drowning. So my guys were on the beach, like the cameraman and the tourist guy, and I just started running. These two pool guys ran past me. They're amazing. And there was this like jetty. So it was like a jetty here, and then a boat. And these guys ran to the end and they dived over the two jetties and the boat, and they swam out to get this guy, and they were bringing him back. And his wife was hysterical. And I was like, no, don't bring him here. Take him to the beach, because we'd never pull him up. We'd never be able to get him up. So I took him to the beach, and I was waiting at the beach, and then started CPR. And they didn't know how to do CPR. So I said, ring for the ambulance. And so I started doing the chest compressions, and then my cameraman came running up. Now he's a stronger guy, so we just swapped. So we were gave him CPR, but he'd been out at sea for probably at least 12 minutes without oxygen. And we started his heart. we started doing CPR for another good 15 minutes. And it was horrible. Like, I don't know if you've ever, you see it on telly, but it's not like that. Like it's like a water, you can hear the waterfall in the chest, like it's like a water in the chest, and he was frothing. And these days you don't do the mouth one, but I didn't even think about it, it's just doing it. And I still can, it was horrible. And we just worked on him. And it was funny because, you're talking about that out of body experience. So I was like, in between breathing, because we do 15 and then I'd do 2 breaths, and we were counting him down, and I was yelling at Rob, my friend who runs Tahiti Tourism at that time, go and get a towel, because I could see his wife was going hysterical, and she was all white. So I noticed these things in the midst of this, and I said, get her a towel. And then I'm talking to her and keeping her calm. It was just the weirdest thing. Anyway, we suddenly, boom, felt the heart. But he was still unconscious, and we didn't know what to do at that point, because he's still unconscious. Do we keep going? But lucky this guy came, and but it was a convention for gay doctors from the US, and it was this guy, this doctor came running up, and he put him into recovery, and we just left them to it. And then we went to the lady, and we were just comforting her, and I said, he's alive. And then they all left, right? So then we were in quite deep trauma from that experience, and actually I just cried, and it was horrible. And the doctor came to see us and said, actually, he probably won't survive, because that's what happens, because he's unconscious still. Anyway, came back to New Zealand. About 10 days later, I got a call. And this guy had been flown to Papeete, and he was on life support, and his wife was with him. And it was my friend Rob, and he goes, are you sitting down? And I said, yeah. And he goes, he's waking up. Oh. And he wrote his wife's name, Ayuko, on her palm of her hand. So she knew he was here. Because, of course, we thought he'd be brain damaged if he did wake up. And he recovered. And so Rob said, do you want to come back up? And I'd been having nightmares. I hadn't hardly slept since that incident. So I took my son actually with me, and we filmed. He had a little camera and he filmed it. And we met with them. And it was so heartwarming, because Ayoko saw me and she came running towards me. And we just had this moment of great hugginess. And he, of course, had no idea. And he looked like a zombie still, like he was all white. And he could barely walk. But anyway, they went back. I'm glad I went, because it was closure for me. I wish my cameraman had come back too, but he wasn't able to make that trip. And then we got an email from them. They'd got someone, they didn't speak English, they got someone to translate, and they said there was a picture of them holding tiger bear. fireworks going off behind.
Yeah.
And it basically said he was back at work and thank you for saving him and that he's well now. And so, but I brought that long winding story, up because you don't know how you're going to react or what you're going to do until you're confronted with it.
Yeah, you just do. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're a pretty amazing woman there, Barbara.
Not all the time, unfortunately, sadly. Only sometimes.
You've had a gun held to your head. Was that the scariest part? The one where you said you had to sneak out of that when you were.
I think that was. I think actually that was one of them. But I had to walk through. My work wanted us to get George Speight to have the first live broadcast with him, and I had a satellite phone in those days. We didn't have it was old school 2001 mobile phones were virtually non-existent. So I had to walk through all the guys, and there was like probably, I don't know, it felt like 120 of them, or all sitting there listening to, and I had to walk through to get. I said to the soldier, the militia, I said, "Is there with George Speight? I need to talk to him." Or Joe Nato, who's the media person for George Speight. Need to go and talk to them. So they led me through, and it was the freakiest thing because it suddenly went. They're sort of talking to each other. It went pin. You could have heard a pin drop, and they're all watching me, and I felt very insecure. Like really quite scared, because what you had then was a lot of young boys, 19, 20, and they'd lived from the village, they'd, very traditional, hadn't not experienced, suddenly they're in this camp, high on testosterone and kava, and this is exciting, and they're part of this big movement. And I knew that the guys with the guns, ironically, were the safer ones to be around than not the guys. Yeah. So that was probably a really scary moment. And I've had many scary moments. I can't even begin to tell you. There's been times, there's been some pretty bad moments. But, you just get through them and hope that you don't fold.
One thing I see a lot on Facebook, and they say it doesn't get enough exposure. I don't really know much about it, but there's this Free West Papua movement. Yeah. I see stuff and I see that.
This is a tragedy. It is a tragedy, and we don't do enough about it. And one of the reasons why we don't. So basically, it's an Indonesia's taken over that country, but they're Melanesians. Like, there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. They're Pacific Islanders. They're not Asian. They're Pacific Islanders. And so they're fighting for independence, and they should never have had it. It was very badly taken away from them, and the UN's got a lot to blame for this. So it's a big, long... It's not cool what's happening. And they are being victimised. They are being tortured. And we don't do enough about it. But the reason for that is there's very little footage or information coming out, and you have to be careful too, because sometimes groups on Facebook, as you know, make up stuff. And so, for example, there was this picture of this woman lying dead on the ground, and it was to do with, it said something about West Papua, she's been killed, tortured. Turned out this woman had been run over in Papua New Guinea, and it was someone had taken that photo. So, so you have to always be really vigilant. So we don't do enough on West Papua. We don't, and that's to my shame. And that's something I'd like to change. But it's getting a little bit easier with social media because there's a little bit more footage coming out. But man, it's a tragedy.
Because I see the photos, and you've got Indonesian soldiers standing over
bodies. Massacres,
massive pits of bodies in there, and I'm like, in the back of my head, I'm like, I wonder if this is true. How come we don't know about it?
Yeah, I've done a bit on it. We've done some stuff. We did this amazing story for online, which myself and this woman called Natalia at work, who, we did this story, and it was pretty amazing on it. But yeah, we don't do enough. But it's more because it's verifying information and it's also getting the pictures. Television's not like print. Print's no excuse. You pick up the phone. But for us, we need pictures to go over my words. So there's some stories that I think are really good, but I won't do because I don't have the pictures for it. We're picture driven, and we're a bit shallow like that.
Is believing kind of thing.
Yeah, but also we're a bit shallow. That's why TV's a bit shallow, because we work to pictures. But it's also hugely impactful. That's why I love television for our people, because we're all about the colour, and we are pictures. Like, you know, we're visual, and I just think, for us, TV is really good, but make no mistake, TV is a bit shallow in some ways as well, because we are dependent on the pictures.
How dangerous is it to go over to Papua?
No, very. So, well, you can't. You have to you'd have to lie. They don't let journalists in, so you'd have to lie and say that you'd have to either pretend that you're doing something else, but you'd have be accompanied by people. And the second thing is, if you were going to do some proper reporting, you'd have to go in undercover, and that's extremely dangerous. You'd have to go like an aid agency. It's extremely dangerous. I wouldn't. I'm too old for that stuff now. Like, I'm sorry, no. It's not easy, and that's part of the reason why there's very little coming out of West Papua. But, you know, I hope, my dream is one day that will change. Needs to change. And the problem you've got is that Indonesians put in a lot of money into governments, like there's a big trading partner, and so governments are less inclined to criticise. So several times at the Pacific Island forums, this issue has come up, and some of the island nations are saying, let's, like, especially the Melanesians, they're like, no, we've got to do something, you know. And then you have other countries who get a lot of aid from Indonesia who go, I think we should be a bit cautious about how we word it. And so, it doesn't get the airing it should.
There was you know how you said, like, our media were picture based. I don't know if you heard that story about Vice. Vice recently, they had photos of all the people that were part of that were executed or part of the genocide in Cambodia, but they photoshopped them smiling. Did you hear about?
No.
I wish we had a fact checker on that.
Yikes.
And I thought that's what, because if you listen to our past episodes on, and some of the guests we've had, we've kind of got a love-hate relationship with the media. Because we like people like you who, you know, you want to, you're based on the facts, but, you know, you're relaying stuff from back home. And then you hear about stories like that. Yeah. You know, and then...
I know there's a lot
of mistrust kind of...
100%, and I get it. And, you know... There's good journalists and there's bad journalists. It's like in any industry, accountants, lawyers, you're going to get the good and the bad.
Lawyers maybe 80% on the...
Yeah, that's right. yeah, that high. No, that's true. So there's layers of journalism as well, and there's people who are different in how they approach stuff. But you know, for us at TVNZ, we go through several checks and balances. It's not just me doing the story. So we have, for example, we always get subbed. We have a story producer who works with us. The story producer works with several journalists. There are several meetings. If it's a planned story, then it's been discussed several days before. It's in the list. We have a meeting in the morning. It's discussed then. And people have an input into suggestions. These are for the most mainstream stories. Most people don't have many suggestions for me, but because they don't know the community. But, you know, every so often they'll come, oh, Barbara, what about this? Oh, yeah, that's a good idea, you know. So... And we've fact checked. We've got lawyers in-house who check. We have story producers who will look at the story and go, no, you need this another voice, or you need this, or you know. So it is a robust thing. But, you know, it's... So, for example, last year during COVID, right, I said it's a Pacific Island family who has COVID, right? And it was a deliberate thing. Like, I definitely wanted to say Pacific Island family. Now, I knew the nationality of the family and where they lived, but obviously you don't want to target them. And I certainly didn't want to name the community. And even to this day, I still won't name the community, even though it's been the government. Anyway, we'll get to that. So I named the Pacific Island community because I said Pacific Island family. And the reason I said that, and it was really important to me, especially after seeing the Samoa, is that I don't believe in hiding information from our people, right? I don't. Like, I'm not going to say, oh, you don't need to know this. You don't need to know this. Like, it's not my job to do. It is my job to inform. But I think a lot of people who didn't know me or know my background or etc. saw it as a white girl getting up and saying, oh, naughty Pacific Islanders, they're the ones who've started this. And it wasn't that at all. Like, it was done for safety. Like, I know because I have my own family who live in some in overcrowded conditions and in South Auckland, and I know that they are going to functions and how they share everything. We share everything. And I was struck into a panic as well. And I don't regret that decision. I'd do it again tomorrow.
Yeah, I was just thinking that because, I had this talk with my brother when it happened because he was kind of affected by it because he got a phone call and they told him, look, you might have been in contact with that person. Yeah. If they just said this person and that, the part of me wants to know, well, I have family there. I'd really like to know what the origins are because we are going to, we're going to cross paths.
That's right. Yeah. And also this was on the first day. Well, it took the track and tracing team a couple of days to get sorted and to start making those calls. And for my mind, I just was thinking safety first. I'm going to alert our community and make sure that they know so that people can start getting tested. I had no qualms about it, and I still don't. But I did come under a lot of, and I get it. I came under a lot of criticism. I got death threat. I got abuse, like you wouldn't believe, personal messages. I was really under attack, and from some I'm not just talking about young bloods out for, young guys out or girls out for blood, saying, oh, she's racist. It wasn't just that. There was also an element of a lot of people, academics, who felt that I shouldn't have said that. And I got to wear that, but I stand by it, and I'll do it again tomorrow. Like, safety first. We're in a pandemic. We're not discussing whether someone stole something from a shop and I'm naming them, going, well, this is we're talking about life and death here. And I don't really care. I've got to make sure that the information gets out. So I don't regret it for a minute, but man, it was, the attacks.
It kind of reveals
there were
people,
cartoons done. Yeah. I was getting attacks from all quarters like you wouldn't believe. And the ones who I was able to explain about to, generally said, oh, I apologize, I'm sorry. So I did get a few, but it doesn't even matter to me. It was just the way of it. And also I was angry because COVID is nothing to be ashamed of. It isn't. It wasn't that family's fault. No, it's no one's fault. You could catch it. I could catch it tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't discriminate. Like, so it's important for anyone can have it. And so I was angry that some people in our community were making it about race, and it wasn't. It was about health. But the other thing was the government of that, where that community, where that family was from, put out a press release naming the country. And so that went everywhere as well. But yeah, it was a tough old time, and that's just what happens sometimes when you're a reporter. You have to make some decisions. And I took advice from a few community leaders the night before when I found out. And all the people I talked to said, Barb, you've got to do it. Like it's, safety first. So I did do it. And then some of those people decided when the public outcry was, how dare TVNZ and that Barbara Dreaver name, say, Pacific Island family, how dare she say that? Some of them decided that they didn't support that. But that's just the way, it doesn't matter. That's just how it is. You just sometimes have to be strong in yourself, and sometimes that just happens.
Do you think those attacks, whether it be from other Pacific Islanders, that just comes from people just angry at like seeing the bad press all the time in the Herald, like
100%, and on the TV,
every single crime is always in South Auckland.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's always in the paper.
And I said that to the people who were attacking me. A few of them, I could sort of see. You could sort of sense that a couple of them, even though it was really abusive, you could sense the hurt. And so those are the people I did reply to, and I said, I get it. You're sick of seeing, and I said those exact same things. You're sick of seeing Pacific Islanders portrayed like on their way to a police station or in a courthouse. I said we're always like the bad. That's how we're portrayed. So I get it. And that is why. But a lot of the people who were doing the attacking had no idea. They didn't even see what I did. Like they didn't see my work. They don't know my work. They just heard about it through someone else, and then they all piled in, and because that's the pack mentality sometimes. But yes.
I was thinking about like how this is because we spoke about this before the last episode about the Herald and
not my favorite
telling all these stories, but is that because of how they used to get money for advertising? There's no more advertising for them anymore. So
I think it's more to do with with reporters. You come to the table with your own stories, or you are given stories. So if you've got reporters who have the contacts and coming up with decent Pacific Island stories, then you're going to get better coverage. And there's just a lack of it, lack of Pasifika in mainstream media. End of story. And so what you're getting is that these sort of stories that are just lazy, what I call lazy stories. We are overrepresented in a lot of things that we shouldn't be, but there's more to it than just that, and so that's what happens. We need more. That's what we're trying to nurture young Pacific Island journalists into our medium. I mentor a couple of people.
Are you seeing a rise in
No.
people that are...
I'm seeing a rise of extremely intelligent young Pacific Island people,
but not
necessarily into media.
Yeah.
There's a couple who are exceptionally talented, who I've had the privilege to come across, and they've been doing some work for us, and they're amazing. It's about representation as well. So at the moment, we're lucky at TVNZ. Like One News and our News and Current Affairs, we represent. Like we've got Indira, Star Cutter on Fair Go. Adrian Stevenon is Samoan. He's like second in command on the Sunday show. Tata Urali, he's like one of the big bosses at One News. Right, he has a lot to do with the stories. So we've got a couple of cameramen too. And I just think we're getting, it's good. The more we can bring in, the better. And there's some young ones coming up who I've got my eye on too. It's about mentoring and helping them, like giving them passion, because our job, contrary to popular belief, we actually don't get paid that much. And so you've got to really love what you do, and it's got to be a reason for you to go to work and want to go to work. And so if I can instill a bit of passion into some of our young ones coming up, then that'd be great. But unfortunately, other newsrooms don't have that diversity.
Sad. We have other platforms now, and you see a lot of
like yours.
Yeah, exactly. Podcasts. You've got people who do Facebook Live.
Yeah.
I noticed that a lot of islanders have really
Big
been
on
drawn to
Facebook.
that.
Yeah.
Because instead of putting it through mainstream media, you've got the I think there's the Pacific Brothers that they came, that a lot that started in the garage, and now they've got shows coming on Sky TV.
That's right, and they're doing it in the garage. I mean, it's amazing. I think that there is a lot of room for that now. Technology has allowed that. I don't know what it is about Facebook, but Pacific Islanders love Facebook. And they say, everyone says, Facebook's it's dying out, and it's just like, you don't know. Everyone I know is on Facebook. And I think it's too, because it's about connectivity with friends and family in the islands. Certainly it is for me. And also I've got so many friends around the world, and a lot of them in the Pacific. And for me, it's just genuinely wonderful to open my page and see such good stuff from my friends. And I've got a professional page too, which I've had to keep separate, because my personal page is for friends only, and family, and but I've got a professional page, and a lot of people contact me on that professional page, and I like sharing stuff on it that I see there's so much good stuff coming out, and talented people. There's that Must Be Tongan's Facebook page. Have you seen it? It's hilarious. Yeah. It is actually my favourite page of all, and I use a lot of their stuff in my Pacific Update, because, stuff that I've seen on their page, so I have my funnies at the end. Pacific Update's not just about news, it's about, I have nice scene around the Pacific. I have funnies, I call it videos of the week. I've got all sorts of stuff on there. It's 6 minutes of all sorts of different stuff, whether it be a bit of singing, a bit of some dancing. I've got the hard news at the top, and then it sort of changes into the biggest fish caught in Niue, and it's wonderful. I love doing it, but it is a lot of work. But
I remember watching a TED talk, and it was Patrick Gower, and he started off by saying the media is dying, and then he went on talking about fake news and stuff, and how he started and all that. And then he talked about, at the end, he mentioned he thought that they're not relating to the people anymore, because they're islanders, they're Pacific Islanders, they're Indians, they're Asians, and the people on TV reporting are not. They don't look like the audience anymore. Yeah. Especially the young people. Yeah. We don't even get the young people anymore.
It's true. And that's why we've got a couple of Indo-Fijians, Indians who work for us, not just necessarily Indo-Fijians, but Indians who work for us. We've got some Asians, and it's important, because especially at TVNZ, we're meant to reflect our communities, and I don't believe we do. Most organisations don't. We're getting there. I think we're better than most, but it's true. It's not only the looking like. I mean, do I look like half Kiribati? Probably not. It's more about the context and the heart, I think. And if we can get more of that, then that would be a good thing.
Just touching on that, do you think that's maybe why, because especially during COVID, there was that big upsurge in people believing in the conspiracy theories, the 5G thing, and it's the vessels, it's the people that are taking it. God. Like you had that Billy TK guy.
Yeah.
And
get me started.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, because it wasn't coming through mainstream. No. So when you think you've stumbled across something, everyone just went crazy. Yeah, and I knew it had gone. I knew it had gone, like it really hit the fan when someone tried to burn down that 5G tower, the supposed...
There's nut jobs everywhere. And unfortunately, social media has its downside as well. There's stuff that happens that I don't think should happen in social media, but it just does. And, that's the downside too. While it can be wonderful, it can also be a curse. Get vaccinated, people, is all I'm going to say. I want to be first. I'll be lining up.
My brother's, he was telling me that they're up at the end of the month or something.
Yeah.
So because he's a frontline worker, he works
Yeah.
with youth. So I was like, I'm glad to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that doesn't get enough. If you see, like, if you watch the news or listen to the radio, mostly it's about people not getting enough. But when he said that, I was relieved. I was like, okay,
It's
I'm
good
glad.
to hear, eh?
Yeah, that it is getting done. So
It is getting done.
Yeah.
Possibly not quite as quick as we'd like, but it is happening, and we are lucky enough to be COVID-free here too, aren't we?
Yeah. Well, we were able. There's a big concert next week. I think that's the 660 concert. This one at Eden Park. So
Let's not make that the super spreader.
yeah, well,
But aren't we lucky that we can have these concerts and stuff?
Yeah.
Eh? Like, we're really lucky.
We can show it off to the world.
yeah. Well, I see on social media like certain sites that I follow on Instagram, and they're like, oh, look at New Zealand. They've got these big raves and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I like sense of pride this year.
Sense of pride.
We done it right.
Yeah, we did do it right.
Yeah.
We did do it right. And one thing I will say is that Pacific Islanders, that we're very good at doing what we're told. We had the highest testing rates out of any group when we had that happen last year. We're really good. we're good people. And I was really proud. And yeah, but I feel proud too. I'm just like you, like, New Year's Eve, we're the only country. I think there was 3 countries in the world that had fireworks being let off, and 2 of them, they weren't allowed to be there. It was only on TV sort of thing. And we were leading the way, and I had all my friends overseas going, wow, you guys are so lucky. And I'm like, we're lucky because we had a good strategy. The country had a good strategy, and we did well. We did the hard time, and we're also small and isolated, so that really helps as well.
Have you thought about writing a book?
Yes,
about all your experiences?
yeah, because I lived, I lived and worked in the Cook Islands for 8 years as well, so I've got lots of good stories to tell. I own my own half own my own newspaper, and so lots of stories to tell. But it's the time. I've got no time, but one day I will. Yeah.
It was funny when we were talking about Michael Field, and we were talking about the elections in Samoa and how tight it is at the moment. And in the back of my head, I was like, that's a Michael Field book right there.
It is.
There was
Absolutely.
It was because when he came, because he said you know him very well. He came in. I hadn't seen a ring binder in years.
I didn't even know that's right.
And he'd come through and he was going through his notes, and I went, man, this feels like.
Okay, you've just made me feel bad now.
I mean, like, man, this was just. Because I remember that's how I look. This reminds me of Form 5 history.
5, yeah.
Got my little dividers there, and I thought, he knew where. He knew where to go.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
He's got good contacts and also good good notes, and he's written some amazing books as well. I really love his books. He's clever. He's very disciplined. I think you need to be disciplined to write a book. And, I have trouble juggling my life and what I do as it is. So, but it's definitely on the cards. Definitely like to write a book. And, man, I'm not going to hold back too. There's going to be names. I will name some of the stories. I'm going to bringing it out. So, one of these days.
When you're a young kid, I'm going to assume you read a lot.
Yeah,
and you love to write. Man, because writing is a big part of being a journalist, though.
Yeah.
But man, that passion for it, like, you still obviously have it.
Yeah, I still love it. And see, I should have left and gone to work in communications or PR and earned a lot of money. That would be nice. But I just can't bear to leave what I love. Like, I love what I do, and I think it's important, and I think it makes a difference as well.
I think if you weren't there, a lot of the Pacific Island countries wouldn't be held accountable, because we have, there's no, like you're saying, like Fiji we wouldn't know what's going on in Fiji.
And one news plays in, I think it's 21 different TV stations across the Pacific. So
I remember watching. I'm watching TV1 News when I'm sitting in Samoa.
That's right.
Yeah, and I'm like, so the Blues lost again to the Chiefs.
Yeah. Damn. That's when you wish you didn't have it there.
I wish I was here for that. That's what's so cool. Like, although just the links that New Zealand still has, people. I think people outside of the South Pacific would not know how tight the ties are between New Zealand and how much of an influence that New Zealand does have on the South Pacific.
It does. Like, I think one thing that I've noticed when I've travelled around the Pacific is New Zealand is much more liked than Australia. And during the coups in the Solomon Islands, there was they had a civil war there, and it was pretty volatile. And I used to always make sure I wore a hat with a Kiwi on it, because we were liked and the Aussies were widely hated. And for quite a good reason, to be fair. Like, there was a bit of racism in amongst their guys. But they'd see you and they go, Kiwi, Kiwi, and they loved our Kiwi soldiers who are up there helping to keep the peace. So I'd always make sure I wore one. I was quite lucky because I had cousins on both sides of the militia, so they put, I was protected, sort of thing. But it was pretty volatile times there too.
How comes? I know Papua New Guinea Australia has a big influence on them as well. Is that because they're closer to them?
100%. Yeah. And also, Papua New Guinea has a lot of resources, like. It's a very rich country resource-wise, and unfortunately the people haven't been the ones to benefit from that, but Australia's gone in and they have a lot of business interests there, and they do put in a lot of aid to the country, and they do come to the rescue when they're most needed. So at the moment there's a COVID crisis in Papua New Guinea. They reckon that it's possibly as many as 1 in 3 people could have it. And so Australia sent in teams, medical teams, and they've taken vaccinations over as well. It's an absolute crisis there. It's really sad.
As a Pacific correspondent, are you concerned or interested in the Chinese influence out there?
Very.
And because I think COVID's like taken that story away from everyone's minds.
And I've done quite a lot of stories on the Chinese influence in the Pacific. I've done quite a lot over the years. I've done quite a few. And it is a big issue because of the different way that the Chinese work in the Pacific. And they're very incredibly clever people, and they play a long game. And I think because we're going to have a shortage of resources in the years to come, it is going to be a big issue. So, for example, last year Kiribati swapped from Taiwan to China, diplomatic allegiance, and we also saw the Solomon Islands swapping. And Kiribati has its EEZ is 3.5 million square kilometres, and it spans all 4 parts of the globe. It's the only country in the world to go north, south, it's on the equator. And the fishing resources there are huge. And also the issue that you've got in Kiribati is that its maritime borders are with the US. And so it's a very valuable place, Kiribati. And now the Chinese influence, they've offered to help develop. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's good, but it's got to be managed well. And it's got to be for the benefit of Kiribati, not for the benefit of China. But, it's got to be said that Kiribati has been alone for a long time. Where's the US been? Where's New Zealand? And New Zealand puts in a bit of aid into Kiribati, but our relationships should have been stronger. And China, to its credit, has, they've gone, we can help you. We'll give you this. And we'll be a good development partner for you. And so I have grave fears for the future for our little region. But at the same time, China were the ones who stepped up.
I see Michael Field has been giving a close eye on the fishing.
Yeah, I've got very grave fears about the fishing. fishing situation. There's these big motherships that are parked outside, and they can have as many as 11, 12 in the one country, and then all the purse seiners come up and they feed in their fish into that mothership, and they go back out again, and our seas are getting stripped. And there's money being made from it, but it's just really got to be managed well. And the problem with COVID is that a lot of our waters aren't being monitored and surveillance, and a lot of those fishing boats are turning off the naughty ones are turning off. So, there's a lot happening in the Pacific, but I think we need to wise up. And I've got some pretty big concerns about what the future might hold. And the last thing we want is an issue like the South China Seas in our backyard. We don't want that. We do not want that. We do not want conflict in our backyard.
We talk quite a bit about the influence that China has in Samoa. Every time I go back, although Samoa's got a flash new airport, and you see the new buildings and that.
It's just a different type of aid. So New Zealand does more developmental aid, like put money into projects, as opposed to like farming projects or business or, stuff like that. Whereas China puts money into the big ticket items like a stadium, a police station,
courthouse.
Courthouse. And sometimes and they bring in their own workers, they bring in their own materials, and it's good for China, but not so much. It makes the politicians look good in that country, and that makes them look good because they can say, I bought, stadium is amazing. I brought this to the table, sort of thing. But nothing is in this life is free, and that's not what aid's about. Aid comes usually with strings attached, so. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said.
It'll be interesting to see what happens with the Samoan elections. If there's a new government, and the deal's still there for the Chinese. It doesn't change.
No, I mean it's up to that country. It's up to the new government as to who they will support. You can only support one or the other. You can't support both. You do deals with one or you do deals with the other. Taiwan seems to focus more of its aid around agriculture, farming, sort of those. They're a bit more gentler, I suppose. Not, but yeah. Anyway, it's interesting times for the Pacific. Anyway, it's been lovely talking to you guys.
Yeah.
I've really sorry, I've talked too much, haven't I? I did warn you. I did.
No, you haven't. We're gonna have to get you on again, because there's so much. We didn't even touch on the fact that you're a Westie just like us.
Yes. How could we not? How could we miss that?
And being from the class, with the legends like you, Ronnie.
Yes, Ronnie.
I remember we had a guy the same year, but apparently he was just as good as Ronnie. His name was Timo Tangaloa.
Yes, I know. Well, of course I know Timo. He was at our school too.
Yeah.
And he was very good.
I remember the stories about him, because we all went to the same church, St. Giles. St. Giles over in Tiana.
Such a nice guy too.
Yeah, and now it's funny we didn't even touch on stuff like that, but I'm sure, the next time we get you back in.
Yeah, definitely.
I just have to say, just listening to, thank you so much, but just how amazing and how strong you are.
Thank you. That means a lot. All the things
that you went, I'm telling you, like that situation when you said you were in the detention center. Yeah. And you could see, that's you one, they try to break you down. Then you can see how easily they, we talked about all those people that supported, that were against Maiparama and that, and how he managed to break them mentally through putting them through their situations, just to hear your story, and then I've never had a gun held to my head, so I can't even fathom or come close to what you've been through, but thank you for sharing your stories.
I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, well, I'll try and avoid that at most, at every cost, but yeah.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. It's just nice to talk, just chat. It's a great thing you do as well, both of you.
Thank you.
Very important.
Yeah, we just, like you said, we just love listening to just learning
Yeah,
more.
but no, it's more than that. You're very clear. You're very good interviewers, both of you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, very good interviewers. So it's more than that. You put people at ease. It takes a certain skill to do that. I know because I recognise it when I see it. So well done, guys. Thank you for having me.
Cheers, Barbara.
All right.
Another Westie. That's right. Oh, thanks. Oh, that was